Welcome back. All right. So, you guys, I am so excited because today I am here with my wonderful friend, Shawnee. We've been having some amazing conversations lately. I thought it was time to bring her onto the show, really tying in sexual exploration in this new fourth pillar into the original three and kind of like how it all came to be. Because I know some of you are still scratching your heads and you're like, I just don't see it and I just don't get it. And I promise next week we are going to start moving back into some more specific authenticity content and body image and worthiness and that kind of thing. But after some really great conversations her and I had had this week, I thought this was the perfect opportunity to bring Shawnee in and really chat about her story and finding her identity and authentically accepting it. Because, as I've said in the past, when we don't accept our sexuality and we don't accept for whatever reason, whether that's like strict religious backgrounds or trauma that has happened to us or judgmental parents, whatever the reason may be, that all affects our ability to stay mentally healthy. It affects, unfortunately, I hate saying it, but it's a huge driving force in suicide rates. And people who struggle with this really spend most of their life feeling like they're living a lie. And that is one of my biggest things. I don't want anyone feeling like that. So the more stories that we can unfold, the more that we can talk about this, the more that we can open it up, the more we can change things. So welcome, Shawnee.
Thank you.
So happy you're here.
I know it's
Um,
so nice to finally do this.
I know we've talked about this like so many
So
times.
many times.
First of all, just introduce yourself. Like, who are you? Where did you grow up? Tell us about you.
So my name is Shawnee. I grew up in the Lancaster, PA area, so the lovely Amish country, homebred, home raised, very country type of upbringing and everything, very religious. But yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
So much. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your story to figuring out who you were authentically, sexually, on really understanding your own self-worth and boundaries of what you're going to accept in your life.
I went through a lot of childhood trauma, and a lot of that was based around religion, to be honest. It was religion and then just some like physical and mental abuse that I had experienced within my family. I had realized when I was, I don't know, maybe five, I would say, as when I can really remember like having an inkling. It was once I was starting to go to school where I just like, I don't know, I noticed that girls are pretty. I didn't really think anything of it because I was little and I was being raised extremely strict Christian. So what else was I supposed to think of that? Like, oh hey, like I just think another girl is pretty. That lasted for a long time. I didn't realize until my senior year of high school where that thought kind of popped in my head, like where I was like, oh, hey, like maybe I would, really enjoy being with a girl and whatnot. But I didn't want to tell anybody or just assume that. So I wanted to go out and figure that out for myself, which is exactly what I did. So I had my first interaction and sexual experience with a woman. And then it was just like a light bulb. I was like, oh, I was like, I think I like this. But up until that point, I had been raised so strict Christian that it was ingrained in my mind that it was only a man and a woman. That was all there was allowed to be. It was never a topic of conversation that had ever come up in my entire life that it could be anything other than that. But once I had that encounter, I finally decided that I needed to come out to my two best friends. I was like, okay, like, they're my closest friends. So why would I not want to like share that experience that I had with them and tell them that at that time where I was like, all right, like I'm bisexual. And when I told both of them, which it was separate, but they basically had the exact same reactions where they were like, oh, like that's weird. They kind of shunned me back in my closet. And then I didn't have another experienced until I was 21 with a woman because I didn't know how to go about it. I didn't know how to talk to women or flirt with women or anything. And then I finally got on Tinder in 2017, and that was when I had my first relationship with a woman. Since then it's been, at least romantically it's only been women.
How did you feel when you knew you unlocked it, you discovered it, you were certain, but the reaction of telling your best friends did not go as expected. And so then
No.
you chose not to tell anyone else. How does that
Yeah.
feel when you're keeping that secret? You're not acting on it and you're not
Yeah.
telling anyone. What does that feel like?
It was honestly very difficult, and I struggled with myself, and more so was I was just beating myself up, where I always had that mindset, like, "I'm not supposed to feel this way, like, this is wrong, like, this is weird, like, this isn't normal," because I didn't know that anybody else, like, that other women had those same thoughts and those same feelings. So when I had finally come out to them and had that, and then, I basically was living a lie within myself, but then I was blaming myself and had a lot of turmoil, and conflict and everything. I know that I had started to come out as bisexual, um, because one of my other friends, she had accepted it and, she didn't make me feel bad for it and whatnot. And she was also curious herself. So I think that that is why she was open to it, because we both were raised in the exact same town within a very similar household dynamic, except mine was way more religious than what hers was. So whenever I'd be out with her and we'd be doing things together, if it ever came up in conversation, I was introducing myself, like, if it ever came up on topic, like, "Oh, yeah, like, I like girls," you know? So then as time went on, like, I just finally got to the point where I'm like, "I'm so tired of this," like, I know that I really like that experience, and those details are for a different day, within a podcast, but I was like, everything that happened within that encounter with the first girl, I was like, there was no doubt in my mind that this is something that is, for me, that is part of who I am. So once I did finally allow myself to venture down that path with like my first girlfriend and and just the dates that I was going on with other women and whatnot, like I was terrified to come out to my family. I had no idea how they were going to react, and I was, like, always the black sheep of my family, so, of course, I didn't need anything else over my head that would have made me different.
Yeah, I feel so much of that. And I think it's interesting because so much of what is pushed on us from society are from cis white males, right?
100%, yeah.
And who will tell you like that this is a choice. Of course, it's easy to think and believe that
Yeah,
if you have never felt anything differently than what you've been
yeah,
told is correct.
exactly.
But I hope that everybody listening to this is of the mind that nobody chooses to make their life harder. Nobody
No,
chooses to be bullied for their beliefs and what they're choosing. Like I strongly believe that it's not a choice.
no.
Really believe that. And I'm hoping everybody listening also believes that if you're here following me on that note. But I think it's such a good point that it's easy when you're in the quote unquote majority
Yes,
to dismiss everybody who's standing up for themselves. And
yeah,
you said, like, you felt like you were wrong, you blamed yourself.
yep,
And those are really heavy, hard feelings to carry at a really young age.
yeah,
I mean, because I think back
yeah,
to like 19 and 20, 21, 22-year-old me who
yeah.
like I think back now and I'm like, that poor thing. She didn't know.
I know,
She had
right?
no idea what she was doing, right? She had no
Exactly.
idea how she felt. She had no idea what was real. And so even though like, yes, technically you were an adult, there was still a very young age to be carrying some really heavy feelings.
Yeah, it takes how many years for us to even mature, especially people who have gone through a lot of trauma in their childhood that takes so many years, so much time, so much effort to grow from that and to work on that and to be able to, heal from things like that. And I know that when I was 18, 19, 20, even though I knew I was through things, I was almost in denial. I thought that I had like gotten over it all. I thought I had already, never forget, but you can forgive. Like, and so I didn't realize until, I was in like my like early to mid 20s where I was like, oh, like maybe I'm not over this and maybe I haven't done all of the work that I need to be doing. And so there was just a lot of like readdressing issues, but I also forced myself to be straight for so many years. And I was just left feeling I was left feeling very used and I had terrible self-esteem when I had no reason to have bad self-esteem. I used it as a crutch, like where men took advantage of me, but I also mutually took advantage of certain men within that time frame. And it's so crazy to think because when I look back now, and even you can can attest for this for me, like I had a lot of encounters with men, but I I can't even do like anything with a man. Like it's just revolting, and I know you can attest,
I've heard some of
and
those stories before. Yes.
yeah. So it's so crazy to think that that happened and that I went through that and I even allowed myself to do that, to myself to have to get over because I had to heal from what I did to myself too, by not
Yeah.
accepting my sexuality and allowing peer pressure to put me back in the closet, which is also so funny because I never allowed anybody to peer pressure me ever. I didn't go to my first party until after high school. Never touched a drug in my life. So it's just so crazy to me that I let two people tell me that it was weird and, allow that to force me to push it off for so many years, to be able to fully accept myself.
That is huge right there. Like what a bomb. Like you had to
Yeah.
heal from what you did to yourself.
Yep.
And that is, I think, really why this sexual exploration pillar fits so perfectly into the other three pillars because we've got body image, we've got worthiness, which you said, you didn't have any self value, so
No.
no self worth. You had no reason not to, but you had none.
Yeah.
You didn't have boundaries because if you did, you wouldn't have been forcing yourself with men,
Yeah.
right? So like
Exactly.
all of that, you were in full say people pleaser, but society pleasing mode. And it has severe ramifications. I mean, there's severe consequences of living in that mode. And then so
Oh, yeah.
often what I had found, and this was my story, I had done all the work.
Uh-huh.
I had gotten so far. And if I go back and listen to podcast episodes from early last year,
Uh-huh.
about this time last year, I'm predicting, basically predicting exactly sitting here right now in this
Yeah.
seat, in this situation. And I'm saying, like, I don't know why I'm being called to go down this journey, but I know I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
And everything started unraveling after I found my body image, my worthiness, my boundaries. And I was solid in those core elements. The thought that was still replaying is the fact that like I still have shame. I still have guilt over sex.
Yeah.
And why is that? I am an
Yeah.
adult. I don't need to feel shame for this. I don't need to
No.
how do I quote unquote cure that? What do I
Yeah.
do? And it led opening this door of exploration and wandering around in a space that I knew nothing about at
Yeah.
all. Got some wild surprises on that note. Um,
Yeah.
but really learning that the people I was coming in contact with in this world who were here for the right reasons, who were solid in who they were, who were
Yeah.
not just looking for validation and looking to put band-aids when they need stitches, right?
Yeah.
They had already done the work and then got down this road. I realized there was this different vibe from them.
Uh-huh.
There was a different energy. Like, and it was one that was so very like freeing and
Yeah.
attractive. Everybody does, you do you. Like
Yeah.
there's no judgment, and there's, I know who I am and I know why I'm here. And the level of communication being in this world, what I
Yeah.
learned is somebody who thought she used her words so well learned that she didn't use her words at all.
Yep.
Right. Like I was like, I'm so good
Right.
at using my words. And then I was like, I am not good at using my words.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm saying words that make me want to puke. And but I think the importance is the fact that you have to know who you are before you set down this road. Because if you set down this road with no self-worth and no boundaries,
You're not getting
you,
anywhere.
I mean, you will get
It
eaten
you're
alive, and it's not in a good fun
Yeah.
way. It is like a shark taking you out, because unfortunately
Yeah.
there's also a lot of people out there who are preying on those looking for validation.
Which is
Yeah.
very, very sad, you know? I thought that I'd been putting in work, like, in my early 20s. Like, as I was figuring out my sexuality, I thought that I was putting in the work, but I wasn't. And I didn't realize I wasn't until I matured more and until I got to where I was, 23, 24, 25, and then the amount that I've changed and then I've grown as a person from, like, 25 until now is insane. Like, just looking back and, I went from using sex as a crutch basically and to get away from my trauma. I used it like, I don't know, a man, like, rides motorcycles to get away from his demons in his head, like, that's how I used it, as well as horseback riding. But at the time, like, it just wasn't as easy for me with horse riding to get away from it as it was in with a sexual partner. So I used that in, in a not healthy way for myself. But I also didn't explore the things that I wanted to either, but I also didn't realize all of the fantasies and wants and things that I had until I got older. Like, only
Yeah.
as I got older did I realize, "Oh, hey, like, I wanna try this. Oh, I wanna try that." And now where those things lie, like, I need a very specific partner to be able to do those things, unless, like, which I'm single right now, and if that it continues that way, then it's fine, like, I can explore it by myself, but at the same time, like, it's also something that I would like to explore it with a partner with. But just as you and AC have learned, it takes a lot of communication, it takes a lot of hard work and dedication, and conversation to get there. And that can be a hard pill for somebody to swallow too, because I'm going in already knowing that this is stuff that I want to explore, which, if I'm correct, you two did not 100%. You both kind of learned it together where
We found each other both at the very beginning of our journeys. Like we
yeah,
were both truly on the same path in the same journey, from very, very, very Christian conservative backgrounds, both
yeah,
feeling like sex was bad and filled with shame and guilt. And while him and I had very different young adulthoods and college
yeah,
experiences, um the emotions behind it were very, very much the same. And we had no idea. Not only did we not know what we were experiencing, we didn't know what was out there, and we didn't know how to even learn. We knew nothing.
Exactly.
And we laugh all the time because our first time together was not, there was no
No.
sparks. I mean, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad, but it was
Yeah.
just ordinary.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm not driving 4 hours again for that. Like,
Right? Yeah.
and here we are almost a year later.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I think what drew us together was there was this intense feeling of safe that we
Yes.
both, while we didn't know what we were looking for, we didn't know what we were seeking, we
Yeah.
both knew it was something, and we both knew it was better to have somebody alongside you. So that's really how we started. I mean, we were never
Yeah.
supposed to end up in like I mean, now we are in a committed, full out relationship.
Yes.
Uh, but it was supposed to just kind of be like, hey, I'll hold your hand, you hold my hand, and we'll jump in together. But like, there was never supposed to be any sort of like emotional
No.
connection. Although, you know, he told me the other
We
day I broke all the rules, and I was like, well, you still keep showing up. Um, but I think that it's so true. And it's scary when you set out, like, now for you, you have an idea of exactly what you're looking for to explore
Yeah.
and what you want to try and all of these things. It's really scary when you set out and have no clue. Like, you're like, I don't even know what's, I mean,
Yeah.
at one point I remember looking at my best friend being like, if I die tomorrow, you have to wipe the Google search history because I'm Googling acronyms that I'm like,
Yep.
and you learn what they are and you're like, oh, that's a that's a thing. Oh,
Yeah.
like,
Right?
it was, I remember him and I calling each other and just being like, you won't believe this one. You won't believe what someone just asked me. Right? It was a wild
Right.
west out there. But what I'm thankful for is, while there was a lot of things I discovered were not for me, I feel like now I can sit here and say authentically, like, I tried things that were nagging in the back of my head and nagging at me, like,
Exactly.
is this what you want? And I was able to alleviate the shame that I've carried for
Yeah.
years upon years upon years.
Yeah. And see, I never really dealt with shame except within myself. Like, even though obviously I grew up and, sex wasn't even a conversation that was had besides the birds and the bees of just periods and puberty and, and just understanding that things were supposed to happen with a man between a man and a woman. And basically you would just learn that as you get older and you get married, basically, you know. But I was always a very hypersexual person, like even from childhood. And I think that is why I never had shame around it. And with my autism too, we don't like we just don't have that. Like that's just not within us to really feel shame. We can feel guilt, or feel like, "Oh, like, I don't know if I really liked that feeling," but it's not shame. It's you
Which
know, it's so crazy to think, you
I feel like
know?
that's amazing though, because I feel like shame is a feeling that I wish no human had to feel. It's an awful feeling.
It is an awful feeling, but I also think it humbles us.
Hmm.
I think it humbles a person within the right context. I think as you've learned with a lot of the conversations, I don't have a filter. You and I both really don't have much of a filter, but I even have less of a filter than you, as you have learned. And I don't feel shame from that. Like, the only time where I would say that I may have felt shame, which it's more just like I don't understand, is like if somebody has brought something up to me. They're like, "Oh, like, why did you say that?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, why did I say that? Like, what are you talking about? Like, why wouldn't I say that?" And then they have to explain to me that it's basically not a social norm. Like, those aren't things you talk about with just any random stranger. And So then I'm just left confused on like what I did wrong. And I'm like, trying to wrap my brain around it, but my brain doesn't work that way.
So I think that's really interesting because I do believe shame humbles us. I believe that not that shame humbles us. I believe that healing shame humbles us because we have
Yes.
to admit, right? Like we have to
Yeah.
put it out there, we have to say it. But it's really interesting that you say this because when you say, like, I don't feel shame and autism and all of this, I would also say that once you've accepted the parts of you that you fully accepted,
Yeah.
you no longer feel shame for.
Exactly.
Shame doesn't live in the light, it only lives in the dark.
The dark. Yep.
So, AC and I have been working, we have hit a point where walls, those walls that we keep up from everybody, we have
Yeah.
each taken them down. And wow, they were really hiding some really ugly shit.
Yeah.
Right. And I still currently have shame over that stuff because I have not even allowed myself to acknowledge those ugly pieces of me.
Yes.
Right. But now, before we left for vacation a couple days ago, as I'm having a conversation with my friends and it's a group chat, and I'm
Uh-huh.
like, shit, we're going down to the Carolinas. There's a pool, there's this, there's that. I forgot to get waxed. I never booked
Okay.
waxed. Right. And I told you this story.
Yes.
But so I'm literally like telling them, like, so if I put my bathing suit on and you see like blue waxes, like I'm currently waxing myself right now and it looks like a toddler's doing this for me. So we're all dying.
Uh-huh.
He is with his own family. He is having car trouble. He is trying to get to my apartment. He is a very long night ahead of him. He is not responding, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Friends are laughing. We are all laughing. We get to the airport the next morning, and I don't remember what I said. We're going through security, and he legit was like, and you know that you don't have to tell everybody everything that's happening. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you did not need to tell them that you were waxing yourself. And I was like, why wouldn't I? And he's
Yeah.
like, why would you? Why would
But
you say that? And I was like, because what if there is a piece of wax stuck and I didn't get it off? And now they're like, well, what was she doing with the Smurf? Like, they're going to wonder what's going on.
right?
At least now they know. And he literally rolled his eyes and he's like, you are ridiculous. I have no shame over that conversation.
Yeah.
How
But
it
what's
went
also
down or what I said.
funny is I've noticed that that's how a lot of men are. Men do not give the details like us women do because they don't care enough about it. Like, it's like they don't just that this doesn't pop in their brain. Like, you tell me you went on a date, I'm asking you 50 bajillion questions about that date and expecting to hear every single playback of that entire date from the second that it started until the second you get home. But men are not like that.
So if you want a really, really good for anybody who's in a male female relationship, if you want a really good exercise, we have done this. Him and I had done this several times. And actually, it's something we probably need to do again. We would go on a date and we would then come home and then we would leave voice notes to each other on Snapchat and recalling the date. Okay.
Mhm.
And telling, if I were to be telling my best friend about this, what am
Uh-huh.
I telling them? Like
Yeah.
replay the night. Okay. And you weren't allowed to listen. Like we both had to wait until we were like done, done. Okay. Now we could go back and listen to each other's voice notes.
Uh-huh.
His were like, and we walked in and she sat down in the chair and then she picked up her napkin and she put it on her lap. And then she picked up her glass of water and she took a sip. And then, and like step by step, what happened
Yeah.
in mine, I'm like, and then I was like, oh my God, where am I supposed to put my purse? Oh my, I don't know where to put my purse.
Yeah.
And, and then shit, I was so worried at this point because you walked away from me and I literally was like, what if he doesn't come back? What will I do? Like, and legit, the first time we ever did it, we were both so taken aback at
Yeah.
what we noticed
Yep.
that it was actually such a good exercise to
Yes.
show how our brains are wired differently, and that maybe he is not trying to make me mad
Yeah.
because he legit doesn't even those thoughts I'm having, they're nowhere in his thoughts. Never crossed his
Exactly.
mind.
Exactly. Yep. It's so crazy just from, like, an experience like that and an exercise like that to realize how different, like, men and women really are, at least in within in their brain and the way that we think. It's just so different with women. Like, the first time that you and I ever talked was like, oh my gosh, we were on the phone for 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Yeah,
Yeah.
4 or 5 hours, just FaceTiming, just chatting about anything and everything and getting to know one another. And that doesn't happen with men. Not to the degree that it did with you and I, which is what,
No.
you know.
And I will say, like, I tell people all the time, AC is one of the absolute best men I've ever met in my life, hands down. I wouldn't trade
Yeah,
him for anything in the world. I feel so lucky, but he's still a man.
yeah,
Like, there are moments where I'm like, and there it is. There it is. That's
yep,
the proof you are still a man. Wow.
yeah,
Like, right? Because and
yeah,
it does almost always come down to just being wired differently. Just
yeah.
genuinely like he asked me something the other day. I asked him and he's like, "What do you think about?" He's like, "Nothing." And I was like, "No, but what?" And he's like, "No, really, nothing." And I'm like, "I've never experienced that." And he's like, "Men can actually think about nothing." And I'm like,
Yeah,
I want that. Quiet,
right,
quiet.
right. I
Like,
think the only peace and quiet I get is when I read,
I don't
to
even
be
get that
honest.
because I'm hearing
Well,
the words in
okay,
my
when
head, right? Like,
okay, I am too, but all I can think is, like, I'm visualizing the entire novel in my head, so there's nothing else going on in my brain. Same with riding horses. I am so focused on what is happening in those instances that I forget about everything else, and my mind just clears, and it's just one thing, not a million different tracks.
I think that is a really important point, and that is a really important, like, piece is we all deserve that sometimes, but as
Yes,
women, we sometimes forget that we need that,
I know,
and
yep.
basically, then that's how I am when I'm trail running, and
Yeah,
right? And if I go too long between trail runs, man, it might come out in an attitude. I
yeah,
might get a little bit sassy over absolutely nothing.
yep.
Um, and it is just that's the truth. And I think tying that back to shame though, like I can say that
Yeah,
and I can know that and I fully accept that about myself and I can say that out loud
uh-huh,
like, listen, I am pissed off and there is
yeah,
not one reason. I cannot give you one piece of logic of why I am so pissed right now, but I am
right?
furious.
Yep,
And that's because I've fully accepted that that's just part of me.
yeah,
But those other parts where I get I react or I get so angry and I let the emotion take over and I'm not ready to put it out there yet. And I actually just I
mhm,
was telling you a little bit
yeah,
this weekend, I actually admitted some things to him that I literally got done and looked at him and was like, I've never told another person this.
yeah,
Like, this is so heavily guarded. And I hope that means I can
mhm,
start healing these pieces
yeah,
because you
and there
can't
were
heal with shame present and overseeing. You can't heal.
and you and I had had some very, very in-depth conversation the first time that we talked, that I know that I don't think either one of us had ever voiced to another person,
Hmm.
because I guess that is probably one thing I feel shameful about, but it's not necessarily shame, it's more guilt, and everything with that, but, and that was something that I felt was very important for you and I to have in common, to be able to have somebody to talk about,
Hmm.
and be able to confide with and have those, raw, not sugar coated, emotions or words. You and I were able to be so brutally honest, and not worry about the other person judging because we were both in the same exact boat.
And I think that's a really important point is in order to heal from the shame, you have to feel safe.
Yeah.
In order to do any of the work, you have to feel safe.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And sometimes we don't give enough credit to the things that make us feel unsafe.
Yeah.
But I think, the reality is, and the goal of this, my goal has always been to help people feel safe. That's the one thing I want to be is a safe space. And I want to let people know that they are not alone,
Mm-mm.
that this is not that whatever journey they're on, whether I've been through it or not, I firmly believe that everybody is out there just doing the best that they can do.
And that's all
And
you can do, which is what people forget a lot of the time. You forget we are all human. We're all going to make mistakes. We're not always going to give ourselves the credit that we deserve, which is what we have to remember. Like, our best is going to look different from others.
yeah,
Uh, like, all of the above, like our healing journeys, our self worth journeys, all of that is going to be different from every other person. And you and I can talk for a million hours, and an hours is still going to be different from like the people that who would be listening, and it could look different from the outside for for us to them, and vice versa, but that's okay.
I think the one thing that AC and I talk a lot about is when we've had a couple of these experiences, right? Where like emotions overcome you. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Emotions overcome me. Let's face it.
Yeah.
Emotions overcome Tab. And,
Yeah.
when we get done and we're both voicing where we're coming from, we're in the same situation. We were sitting in the same room. We both went through the same thing,
Yep.
but through such completely different filters that
Yes.
it wasn't the same situation. Right. And I think that is
Right.
sometimes what we forget. Where him and I think what we do well is
Yeah.
the fact that we can sit back and say, I feel this. And he says, I felt this. And hence why we each acted the way we did. And while one of us, typically me, may gently overreact
Yeah.
and cry, we can each understand that nobody set out to hurt the other one, that there's no
No.
blame here. And when we end, there's no anger.
No.
There's nothing to settle up. There's nothing to prove. It's just, and then he'll say, like, this is how I felt. And we both are like, oh, shit,
Yeah.
I should
And
have thought of that. But how can you?
exactly. And to me, that's a perfect example to reflect on an individual because, like you just said, you too come out by the end of that discussion, that conversation, whatever it is you guys are doing, and you come out with no anger against the other person. But as an individual, we forget that when we're struggling with something within ourselves, that we continue to stay angry at ourselves. We continue to beat ourselves up. We continue to just not forgive ourselves within those situations. And like with my autism and just some other mental disorders I have, like I'll have meltdowns by myself, especially when I can't find something. Everything has a place, but it's also can look very disorganized and very just almost messy. I should say, like on my desk and my tables and stuff, but I have a place for everything. So when I can't find something, when I knew that it was in one place, I get so mad at myself. I'll get myself so worked up that I'll have a breakdown. I get so mad at myself for that, for having that overreaction to these emotions that I'm having. But I'm just like, the only thing it's doing is hurting myself.
It's
The only
funny
thing I
you
can do is work towards being better.
it's funny you say that because we had we the other night we had an instance where I overreacted.
Uh-huh.
My emotions got the better of me, and when we came together and we each said where we were coming from, and we were coming from, totally different worlds. And we ended the night, and he put his arms around me, and he's like, "We are a team. We are in this.
Yeah.
You don't need to worry." But yet I woke up in the morning still feeling ashamed of myself, still
Yeah.
feeling guilty, still angry at myself that I let my emotions get the best of me. And as he's saying,
Exactly.
it's over, let it go. I,
Yeah.
I can't. And he's like, don't go down the rabbit hole. And I'm like, uh-huh.
Yeah.
And he's like, don't go down the rabbit hole. And I'm like, it's way too
Okay.
late. We're down, we're around, we're
Yeah.
lost. Like,
But when you find yourself going down that hole, you have to remember instead of going down the hole, go out the other end of the hole. Go out the other end. Look
yeah.
at it as a learning experience. Hey, I overreacted. I can't go back and change my actions. It sucks. But what am I going to do? You've had your conversation with one another. You've gotten over it together. Forgive, forgot, whatever it ends up being. No anger towards one another. So then you just have to look at it as, oh, like you had that conversation. So you were able to get, you know, those tools for next time. So, okay, instead of being like, oh, what could I have done different in this situation? Like, oh, instead of stewing on that, stew on what you can do better in another situation that it pops up.
And I think that's a really important point because I feel like the one thing that we forget is that, and you said this already, we are human.
Yeah,
So guess what? It's gonna happen again.
exactly.
It's going to, hands down, Tabitha will overreact once again.
Yep.
The goal is to react less and
Yeah.
maybe not such a big temper tantrum on my part, but
But that's a goal to work towards.
it's a goal to work towards. And the reality is, I might do well for like 3 years and then boom, because
Yeah.
we're human. And also unlearning, like we are unlearning decades upon decades worth of
Uh-huh.
shit that has been pounded in. Unlearning is practice.
Oh, it's so hard too.
You can have all the clarity in the world. You can be like, oh, I know why I do this. That doesn't mean you just stop.
No.
Like nothing fucking
Yeah.
changes.
And it's funny that you bring that up because I didn't say this in the beginning of the podcast, but like I'm adopted and I know my biological family, but my adopted mom was the one who was abusive and who was a narcissist, just did all of these awful things. And as I've gotten older, I slowly realized that I had learned so much bad, manipulative, narcissistic behavior from her that when I was in my when I was in my late teens and early 20s, I did some of that stuff. When I was that young, couldn't I couldn't really process it properly. Like I knew what I was doing and that I shouldn't be doing it, but I didn't know how to stop myself. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to start. And it's so funny is like jealousy. I don't even know if you and I have talked about this too much. I used to be so jealous. As you've known, like I'm not a jealous person now at all. I don't have a jealous bone in my body.
Which
Like,
also comes from accepting who you are completely.
yes.
That is a piece of it, right?
Yep.
Like imagine, and I would love to get your thought on this. If
Uh-huh.
you were still living the lie, if you were
Yeah.
still pretending you were straight, when you meet or see a lesbian
Mhm.
who's out in public living her best life, how do you not be jealous?
Yeah.
Because you're not authentically happy. You're not living authentically.
Exactly.
You're not holding your boundaries. You're not living up to your self-worth.
Yep.
How can you not be jealous of the person who is? So often jealousy, not always, there's different instances, but so often
Yeah.
jealousy comes from the fact that we're lying to ourselves about something.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
crazy.
jealousy is a whole conversation for like
Yeah.
another
And
18 episodes.
oh yeah, and especially with me, like within relationships, like that was honestly where most of my jealousy stemmed from. The times that I've experienced it, like as I've gotten older within my relationships, I really sit back and I look at the bigger picture. And I'm like, why am I feeling this way? Because I know I'm not a jealous person. I like the things that I like, so why am I having jealousy? Because there shouldn't be. Within one of my relationships, I realized it's because there were a lot of insecurities from their side in the sense that they were allowing other people to interfere within the relationship and weren't setting up boundaries with other people. So then it left me feeling jealous and insecure about our relationship. But
Yeah.
that wasn't my fault. But within that specific relationship, I was a crazy person because it drove me insane.
And I
But I
think,
also go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, I think that that totally, it does, jealousy can fluctuate from relationship to relationship and
Yeah.
from experience to experience, even with the same person, right? Like
Uh-huh.
it's, there's so much when it comes down to being able to discuss jealousy. Like people will say, like, even the most non jealous person out there will still have bouts of jealousy from time to time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
the key to not feeling and not suffering from the jealousy is the
Mhm.
ability to break it down
Yes.
and look deeper within,
Yep.
which truthfully, it sucks. Whatever it's going to show you
Oh,
is going to
yeah.
be ugly. Whatever jealousy is here to teach you, it's not pretty usually, like
No.
ever. No.
And when I had my jealousy when I was younger, I realized that it stemmed from, like, my mother and the abandonment issues that I had had. And until I was able to tackle those, unfortunately, just because of how severe the trauma was, it's never gonna go away. My fear of abandonment is never gonna go away, and there's always going to be some part of me that struggles with it, and that's one thing for me that, I have to find a partner that is capable of giving me the things that I need within that, which that's also a fight within myself because we are responsible for our own feelings and emotions. We're responsible for our inadequacies. We're responsible for our own trauma and our own healing journey. So it's so like contradictory because, I recognize that. I recognize that I'm in charge of how I feel, how I react, but at the same time I'm like, I know that I need certain things from a person within a relationship due to these emotions that I deal with, and it's sad because I'm like, I don't wanna be throwing this on somebody else. But unfortunately, it's just so deep rooted that there's always gonna be a little bit of it, and I'm always gonna need a little bit.
I think we all have that though. I think we all have that to some degree. And it's like that is another conversation we had this weekend. Um,
Yeah,
we talk a lot about like
yeah,
whose is this to hold? Is this yours to hold, mine to hold, ours to hold? And there's
yeah,
very rare circumstances that it is ours, right?
yeah,
Together. But the one thing I was saying I needed help with, and he's saying, I don't think I can help you. And I sat back for a minute and I was like, you can't do the work.
yeah,
I have to do the work. But here's the problem, the unlearning, we're going back to when I was like 2, 3, 4 years old.
yeah,
I don't know I'm approaching this. I don't know I'm there. So like when I get into when I reach this, when I get here, when my toes are on the line,
mhm,
I need you to make me aware
yeah,
so that I can do the work, so I can pull back, so I can self-reflect, so I can change my behavior. Because
yeah,
otherwise, I don't know I'm there until I'm off, I'm unhinged. And
yeah,
now I've ruined everything,
yep,
right? Because
right,
I didn't catch myself. I'm not aware enough yet to be able to catch myself where it's coming. I can catch myself now with jealousy. I can catch
mhm,
myself now with a whole lot of things that a year, 2 years ago, I definitely couldn't.
yep,
But this one, we just took this wall down and I was like, oh, fuck.
yeah,
So I need your help. And he was like, okay, I can do that. And in that help, what I need is, again, I have to do the work, but the calmer you can stay, the less you can react,
Yeah,
the easier we can move through this and I can unlearn this. Because if I'm getting upset and you're getting defensive and now we're just escalating,
and yep,
and at the time, at the end of each and every single one of these escalations, we sit here and nobody's even angry with each other.
yeah,
Let's just skip the escalation and
yeah,
keep it down here. And so that's
exactly.
what we've been working on is this isn't whose work is this to do, but how can I support you as you do the
Yeah.
work?
And it's I feel like it depends on how you were raised and just the kind of relationship dynamics you've had in the past with family, with friends, romantically, but I know a lot of people that find it very difficult to stay calm when their emotions start to increase and increase and increase, which yeah, and but that's where it takes, like, the right person to be able to do that with you, and I've noticed a lot that there are people in relationships where you have one person who is really trying, where you have one person who's staying calm, as calm as they can, while the other person is just losing their shit. They're screaming, they're yelling, they're cursing, they're going through the whole 9 yards. And then eventually the other person, can only take so much. You could only handle so much of that to where it starts to build up too. But you also have people that don't wanna put in the work, or maybe they're not ready to, or maybe they just wanna stay in denial. And that's what, I've noticed is very hard for me, is to find that person that can help me stay calm within those situations. But I also have learned that if, like, just based off of one relationship that I had, we had never once fought in an entire 8 months, never yelled, never even raised our voices at one another until we had broken up. That was the only time that we had a fight, was literally as we were breaking up. And I look back and I reflect on that relationship a lot because we both equally gave the other person exactly what we needed without having to ask. And if we had something that we knew may possibly upset the other person, we in advance pre-warned before a conversation even started to make sure that we were both in the right headspace to have that conversation and have it calmly. And obviously that doesn't come naturally like that normally. Normally it takes the work to put in, but you can get there. But you
Oh,
have to
yeah.
find a partner like, you and AC who are willing to put in that work together and become better people together, even though it's tough. I know sometimes you both want to strangle one another. Um,
It's tough. I mean,
yeah,
it is. And it's funny because when he left yesterday and he said to me, I like you, I care about you, I care about your kids. I want you to be better. And then he said, and I want to be better. And because at first I was like, you want me to be better? I'm not sick. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
shit, you want to keep doing the work. Okay. I guess we'll keep going.
yeah,
Um, but that is the key. And sometimes, like I said to you earlier, sometimes you get in these moments where it feels like you just need to sit back and relax, back and have fun. But the reality is what you need to do is get through this
hiccup.
leg of the journey, and
Yeah,
then you can sit back and relax. Cause and right now him and I are in a we're very like knee deep in a leg that's like we have uncovered
yeah,
a lot of stuff lately that we need to work through, and we are, and we will, and it's great. It's great. Um, but, oh, this is an amazing conversation, and you know that I mean, you know that I can talk to you all day because 'cause we've done that before.
oh, yeah, literally.
Um, but I'm so excited that you know, agreed to come on
Yeah,
and share your insights on how really not being true and not being out with your sexuality brings
yeah,
shame, brings a lie, brings a fight within yourself. And the importance that this all plays
Yeah.
in defining yourself.
Exactly, and something that we were just talking about the other day is, like, within some of my fantasies and some things that I want to explore, I had that conversation with you because I just needed another, person's view with everything, and, I began to almost question my sexuality again, and you were able to set me straight on that track.
That a seed of doubt was planted, and there was absolutely an instance in a relationship ending that
Mhm.
sometimes those things, and that's the thing I think we all have to remember, is emotions are not logical.
No,
Emotions are not rational. They don't make
no.
sense. So like you had this moment of like this relationship dissolving, and you're like, well,
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong. And I just sat there and I was like, that is not true at all. I'm 100% sure you're not wrong here.
Yeah.
And as we talked about it, and you're like, yeah, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gay. Like I'm
Yeah.
definitely, and I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but I think that's an important thing, is we all question our own authenticity from time to time.
Yeah.
And what's important is to have the person in your corner, not who's going to tell you what you want to hear, but who's going to tell you what you need to hear and the
Yeah.
truth.
Yes.
Um, and call you out on your bullshit, because let's face it, that's what a good friend, that's what a good partner does. They call you on
Exactly.
it.
Yep.
We've talked a lot about that, and
Yeah, we
he said
have.
to me as he was leaving yesterday, and he's like, thank you for calling me out on my bullshit. He's like, thank you for calling me out on the double standards. He's like, I fucking hate it. I hate it,
Yeah.
but I need it. We can't get better without it. So sometimes it feels like I don't want
No.
to hurt somebody's feelings.
Yeah.
But the reality is, if you care about them, if you respect them, you're going to show them what they can't see.
Yep.
And that is that. So this was a
Yeah.
fun episode. This was
It
amazing.
was.
So on that note, you guys, everybody go out and have like an amazing day. Have a good day, guys.
Bye.
Bye.